Welcome to Uplift Talk with Candice J. I want to give you a quick word of encouragement that is inspired by the character in the Bible, Mephibosheth, which is found in 2 Samuel 4 and 4 and 2 Samuel chapter 9. Read the whole chapter of Mephibosheth. Well, he was lame in his feet. He was dropped as a child. He was dropped at 5 years old by his nurse who was trying to take him to safety because his father, Jonathan, and his grandfather, Saul, had just been murdered. So she was trying to do the right thing of fleeing to protect Mephibosheth. But in her fleeing, he was dropped. As a result of him being dropped, he was made lame. What does it mean to be lame? It means to have an injury, an illness that affects the leg or the foot or some part of the body, making one fair game, making you infirm, making you inadequate, making you weak, putting you out of order, making you defective, which means you're malfunctioning, you're broken, you're cracked, you're torn, you're scratched, you're deformed. So he was dropped, which means to be let go of, to be released, to be unhand, to be relinquished, to be abandoned, to be excluded, to be forsaken, to be neglected, to be cast off, to be shunned. He was dropped. Do you know, have you ever been dropped? Life sometimes can drop you. People can drop you. Like Mephibosheth, he was dropped. I like to call this title DOP, dropped on purpose. So he was lame in his feet. He grew up in Lodabar, which is a low place. It's a wilderness place. It's a place of desolation. It's a place of isolation. It's a place of no pasture. Sometimes you'll be forced into Lodabar in your walk with God, an isolated place, a desolated place, a wilderness place. DOP, dropped on purpose. People can drop you like Mephibosheth. Family can drop you. The church can drop you. Relationships can drop you. But what do you do with the drop? Do you allow it to continue to make you a cripple? Do you allow it to continue to make you lame, where you can't be mobile, where you can't move, where you can't be steadfast, always abounding in the work of the Lord? I admit I've been lamed in some areas, but when you realize you've been DOP, dropped on purpose, you realize that you weren't dropped because of what you look like on the outside. You weren't dropped because you didn't meet the qualifications of people. You were dropped on purpose. God allowed them to drop you on purpose. It was a song in high school, a secular song called Drop It Like It's Hot. Okay, so I like to flip it and say, you were dropped because you were too anointed. You were dropped because you were appointed. You were misunderstood because you were different. You were dropped because people didn't understand you. You was dropped because there was a call on your life. You was dropped because you didn't fit in. You didn't fit the status quo. The Lord allowed them to drop you because he didn't want you to continue to be used and abused by people. You were dropped in that relationship because he knew that woman or that man was no good for you. He wasn't able to take you to where you needed to be. So there's a reason for the dropping. There's a reason when people fall off and they don't call you or don't text you. There's a reason when the relationship ends. It's because you've been DOP. You've been dropped on purpose. But I'm so glad that even though you might have been dropped on purpose and I might have been dropped on purpose by people, I was not dropped on purpose by God. When you are in God's hands, you can never be dropped. When you're in people's hands, they can drop you. They can neglect you. They can forsake you. But the devil thought that being dropped, being DOP, dropped on purpose, what meant that you would arrive at your destination DOA, dead on arrival. But how many of y'all know that it may look like I was a DOA, it may look like I was a dead on arrival, but I was dropped on purpose like Mephibosheth. And as a result of him being in Lodabar, David said, is there anybody left in the house of Saul that I can be good to, that I can show kindness to, because of his covenant he made with his friend Jonathan? And he found Mephibosheth where he was in Lodabar. And so he didn't have any food. He had a poor self-image of himself. And when David found him, he was able to sit at the king's table. So remember, when you're dropped on purpose, there's a reason to it. It's to sit you at the king's table, because the tables that you've been sitting at no longer feed you. Why continue to sit at a table that don't feed you no more? Why continue to sit at a table that don't serve you? Why continue to sit at the table of people when there's a king's table waiting for you? When God says, I prepare a table for you in the presence of your enemies, and your cup runneth over. So it's a good thing to be DOP, dropped on purpose, because you're anointed, you're appointed, and the best is yet to come.